Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are logging in from around the world. What a wonderful opportunity this is. My name is Sharia Walker, and I'm the Senior Youth Development Specialist at the Islamic Development Bank, and I'll be your MC for today. So let's begin today's event with the recitation from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
Now with a few housekeeping guidances to ensure a smooth online event. So for our guests that are joining us through Zoom, please find at the bottom of your screen the globe icon for translation. Please select your preferred language in English or Arabic or French. And also, in order to ensure a smooth interaction, if you have any comments, please drop them in the chat box. However, if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Your microphones will be disabled. For those of you who are joining us through YouTube, also it's a live streaming, so please do, put your comments and put your questions through the live chat box, and we will also be checking that and feeding it to our speakers and our panelists. So with that, it is my privilege and great honor to welcome you here today to the 10th Youth Development Forum entitled Building Youth Resilience, Transitioning to Green Economy and Beyond. I'd like to welcome our esteemed speakers and panelists to this very exciting event. Now let's move to today's event. The Youth Empowerment Agenda is a priority of the Islamic Development Bank, and youth development is mainstream throughout its sector projects, focusing on the priority areas of education, economic empowerment, and engagement. This Youth Development Forum is our 10th year anniversary and a standing annual activity that is in line with our engagement objective. With this, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker to give the opening remarks. Please help me in welcoming His Excellency, Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, ISDB Vice President of Operations. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharia. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of the Islamic Development Bank. And on a personal level, I seize this opportunity to once again reiterate my interest, passion, and enthusiasm in participating in these kinds of initiatives aimed at supporting youth development. The Youth Development Forum is a flagship annual standing event held on the sidelines of the ISDB Group annual meeting. It brings influential thinkers, policymakers, international development policy experts, and most importantly, youth delegates to address, discuss, and debate critical issues of relevance to young women and men around the globe. We are delighted to have you with us to participate and share this special occasion, our 10th Annual Youth Development Forum. In doing so, I would like to take a few minutes to visit the past Youth Development Forums, and this is to assist in recognizing or to facilitate, to appreciate how far we have come. Over the years, The forums have covered a variety of themes and explored pressing issues relevant to youth, including youth employment, youth entrepreneurship, youth and financial inclusion, and meaningful youth engagement, to mention but a few. And these have been very productive and informative sessions. The very first Youth Development Forum took place in 2012 in Sudan. And in the following years, it traveled across a variety of IFDP member countries, including Tajikistan, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Mozambique, Tunisia, Morocco, and Uzbekistan. The Youth Development Forum is a cherished opportunity to connect with young men, young women, and men in our member countries and hear from them directly. In 2017, we held the first Youth Summit, where youth delegates from nearly all member countries were invited to attend the event. The meetings, agendas, and communiques that were prepared by these youth set the foundation for the priorities of the bank's first youth development strategy, with the theme 3 E's: education, empowerment, and engagement. Another critical recommendation that was made in the youth community was to ensure that the YDFs, the Youth Development Forums, are more hands-on and provide capacity building opportunities for youth. I'm happy to share that since 2017, nearly every forum has been preceded by a skill building training for youth. In fact, yesterday was the final day of the hybrid skilling youth for green economy and greenpreneur training. Today, we celebrate our 10th Youth Development Forum, and the topic couldn't be more relevant: building youth resilience, transition to green economy and beyond. With many countries transitioning towards a green economy, the expanding green economy will engender new employment opportunities as well as risks. The transition to a green economy has broad implications for the world of work and, if well managed, could generate a wealth of just and smart job opportunities for young women and men. Studies reveal that there are huge job creation potentials in the green economy. And according to an ILO report in 2018, transition to a green economy could add millions of new jobs to the market. I look forward to today's discussion that will bring different perspectives on the issue at hand. And with these thoughts, once again, I welcome our distinguished panelists and participants. I would also like to thank the youth organizing team for organizing this forum and bringing awareness to this important topic in order to advance youth empowerment and help us further align our work with the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Mansour, for this overview of the Youth Development Forums, the Youth Development Forums journey of where we've been, where we are, and our direction moving forward. Before we move to our panel discussion, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our youth that joined our hybrid training over the duration of this week. As VP Mansour mentioned, the training concluded yesterday, and we had more than 800 youth registered for this Skilling Youth for Green Economy and Greenpreneur training in partnership with Quranic Egypt consultancies. Furthermore, we have a very special and exciting announcement that we would like to make at the concluding of this event. So please do stick around. Without further ado, let's move to the second part of today's program, the panel discussion. Please help me in welcoming your moderator, Ms. Irene Baghdadi. Ms. Baghdadi is the head of entrepreneurship and MSMEs in Quranic Egypt since 2014. In the past decade, she focused on the intersection of technical and business aspects of clean technology. Ms. Baghdadi co-established Egypt's first incubation, acceleration, and growth management programs in the clean technology markets, and has advised more than 100 startups and MSMEs in the MENA area, working in the water, energy, food nexus from technical aspects to investment readiness. Irene, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharia, for this wonderful opportunity. It's truly an honor and pleasure to be with you today. And thank you, Dr. Mansour and Sharia, for the wonderful warm the vision and the great initiative.
Irene, you're breaking. Irene, you're breaking up. We're losing you, Irene. Okay, we'll just give a few minutes for Irene to check Irene's connection. While we're waiting, I'd like to just introduce our esteemed panelists. With us, we have from the ILO, and please just, if you can alert me once Irene is back on the line. So to introduce our esteemed panelists, we have with us Ms. Olga. Ms. Olga is from the ILO, and she is the Senior Skills Specialist in charge of the ILO Green Skills portfolio. We also have with us from the public sector, Tamer Taha. Tamer is the advisor to the Minister of International Cooperation of Egypt on innovation, digitization, and entrepreneurship. We also have another very exciting panelist who represents the youth and youth associations. We have Hanan Al-Nuwaisir, and she is the council member at the Arab Youth Council for Climate Change. We also have our in-house specialists. I'm really excited to introduce my colleague Oletunji Yusuf, and he is the Senior Climate Change Specialist here at the Islamic Development Bank. We also have from the private sector, Mr. Hassan Mansi, and he is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and program director at Flat 6 Lab. So I think I've introduced all of our panelist member, and I'd just like to check if Irene is back on the line with us.
I am back, Sharia.
Okay. Okay, take it away, Irene.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for introducing our esteemed panelists. And I'm not sure how much you heard from my introduction, but I was basically thanking Sharia and the team at the Islamic Development Bank for this wonderful opportunity. It's truly an honor and privilege to be with you today. And I wanted to thank Dr. Mansour as well, and Sharia for really setting the scene for why we're here today, and the mission and the vision of the bank, which has been the case for the last more than a decade and will continue to be moving forward. So without further ado, thank you very much, Sharia, for introducing the panelists. And actually, I would like to start with Ms. Olga. Ms. Olga, if you're ready. Ms. Olga Streska, Senior Skills Specialist in charge of the ILO Green Skills portfolio. And, I'm particularly interested to start with Ms. Olga because the ILO has truly been a leader in green entrepreneurship and green skills development for a very long time, at least in the case of Egypt, as far as I can remember. As Quranic Egypt, we worked with the ILO probably 10 or to 15 years ago to develop the what I believe to be the first waste management, entrepreneurship, and skills building program in Egypt and possibly the region as well. So the ILO has had this vision for a very, very long time and continues to have this vision and continues to proactively invest in green entrepreneurship and in green skills development. So Ms. Olga, my question for you is, what types of skills development programs are you working on globally, building on your more than 2 decades of experience in this area? And this could be both, at varying levels, be it at the university level, all the way to the vocational training and the executive training programs that you do. And it would be wonderful, given that the ILO has presence in over 10 countries. It would be really great if you could shed light on some very different examples of programs that you're working on in different countries.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you very much for the opportunity for the ILO to be here. It's a real pleasure. And also congratulations on the 10th Youth Development Forum. That's a big success, certainly. Thank you also for the nice words about the ILO and our work globally, but also in the ISDB member countries. Certainly we're very present. Well, let me just start from, since we're discussing the whole green economy agenda, the climate change and the measures which are related to the transition. Of course, this transition comes at the background of multiple transitions. We need to think also about digitalization and other challenges of the future of work. And all of them bring opportunities of creation of jobs, which is something what we really need and what youth needs the most. Because youth employment has been a huge challenge globally, and it has been a huge challenge also in the ISDB countries. Youth employment is usually much lower than the average employment. The unemployment rate is usually twice as high, and there is a real deficit of decent work, of good quality work that may attract skilled youth. So that's why creating green jobs and green and decent jobs and digitalized jobs is something what may be particularly interesting for the region. So what we're doing, you asked me about 3 different examples, and I was thinking to give you like a good mix, also to give a good idea of what we're doing. Well, first of all, we have received a lot of requests from countries to support them in identifying future skill needs. That's probably the highest volume we receive. They want to develop their capacities in institutions on how to anticipate skills for the future, knowing the new methods, the methods which are qualitative, quantitative, knowing how to improve the labor market information system, and also knowing how to establish some basic rules of social dialogue, develop institutions so that there is a direct discussion on the future of work, the world of work with the world of work. So this is the key principle of social partnership, because as you know, as the ILO, we don't work only with governments, with ministries, but we also work with the representatives of employers and trade unions. And we truly believe that this is the key to signal the labor market changes to the education and training. So this is the big package of projects. We do a lot of projects at sectoral level. We have the so-called approach, which is called Skills for Trade and Economic Diversification. And that is an approach at sectoral level to anticipate and develop skills together with the private sector. So it's done really in a very interactive way. And we can adapt that approach depending on the specific needs. So it could be also green, it could be taken in the context of the digital agenda. And we implement it in many countries around the world, including many ISDB countries in Algeria, and Morocco, and Tunisia, and Malaysia, in Egypt. And in fact, we had several state projects there, Senegal. So this is a well-established tool. Now, the second example, we basically took this a step forward, and we thought, okay, what can we bring to countries specifically on how to guide them? Really, it's how-to tool, how to guide them in greening, technical vocational education, training and skills development, and prepared this new approach, which takes and capacitates institutions from identifying which skills will be needed, the core occupations, and then helping them through a coaching program to update or develop occupational standards, curricular development, teachers training, greening campus, and on the whole greening practices to make sure that the whole process from the beginning to the end is green. The materials as well as the process in the institutions. And as this is accompanied by a coaching program, the institutes, along with the experts, are developing the program and implementing the program. We now work with Cambodia and the Philippines. We have the next group of countries awaiting. And I think that it is actually a very useful tool, particularly for the countries of the ISDB. And then the third one, which I wanted to mention, which was developed particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when everybody experienced a huge loss of work opportunities. There was a work deficit. Everybody needed also to suddenly start working online and studying online, and there were some sectors experiencing spikes in demand and other sectors losing a lot of jobs. So we came with this new approach, which is called rapid assessments of reskilling and upskilling needs in the context of the COVID-19, and implemented that in many countries around the world, including Nigeria, Uganda, Morocco, Cameroon, and Kuwait from the ISDB countries. We identified, for example, that around half of workers, job seekers, and employers recorded a spike in demand of digital skills. And what is interesting, around a third of them all state also the sharp increase in demand for green skills. This is very interesting during the COVID-19 particularly. There were some specific results quite typical for the region. So, for example, in Kuwait, we found out that, of course, there was a work deficit and also loss of employment, but very often it was also linked to the skill shortages, because the country is also used to rely on incoming migrant workers, and this was not possible during the pandemic. And that also brought us to the important conclusions of the need to skill the local youth and also provide the job opportunities of decent work, really interesting work for youth locally in Kuwait. So these are just some examples for you. And of course, in the whole approach for the ILO, as we know that transitions, they potentially will bring a lot of jobs, and we know that the net employment effect will be possible. What will be positive overall, but unfortunately also the transition could be quite painful. That's why for us it's very important that transition is just, it is inclusive for all groups, including youth and women and other people such as migrant workers, and it's also human-centered, that we don't really put the technologies at the core of our agenda of policies, but rather people. Thank you. Over to you, Irena.
Thank you very much, Olga, and thank you for presenting, as you mentioned earlier, very, very different instruments that the ILO is using. And I'm hoping that we could probe on this a little bit more in your next question. Moving on to a representative from government, Mr. Tamer Taha, who is the advisor to the Minister of International Cooperation of Egypt on innovation, digitization, and entrepreneurship. And I've known personally Tamer for quite some time, and as an individual, he has truly been a role model in embodying what his title, which is innovation, digitization, and entrepreneurship. This is the field that he's been promoting for over a decade, that he's been supporting for over a decade, both academically in terms of R&D, innovation promotion, and entrepreneurship. So it's truly an honor to host him in this panel. And my question for you, Mr. Tamer, is what is the role of being an important representative of youth in the international cooperation in the ministry? What is the role of international cooperation and the programs that you have been implementing to promote the green economy as well as youth participation in the green transition? And it would be great, Tamer, leading up to your response, if you could also point to some of the programs that the ministry is working on, and then reflect on the role of international cooperation, particularly in green economy and the youth. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Irene, for this nice introduction. And allow me first to congratulate my colleagues from the Islamic Development Bank for the launch of this 10th Youth Development Forum. It's a pleasure to be with you and the distinguished panelists in this very interesting topic. And let me start with saying that the transition to the green economy is as Olga said, opens a lot of opportunities, but it's also a very complex process, especially because we are talking about different elements of development, including food security, transportation, renewable energy, agriculture, and so on and so forth. And the challenges faced in this transition are very complex and very interdependent. And I believe the role of youth and innovation, entrepreneurship, and digitalization is crucial to untangle such complexities and to overcome these challenges. We at the Ministry of International Cooperation, we work with all international development partners, whether they're multilateral or bilateral, in finding innovative solutions in order to do such transition towards the green economy. And this is through, first of all, finding innovative way of financing these projects, because we are talking about mega projects. Either we are talking about solar energy plants or silos for grain, or finding innovative ways to finance electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. So these are mega projects, and we work with different development partners, definitely including the Islamic Development Bank group on these projects, to find innovative way to finance as a government these projects. And it's done hands in hands with the private sector. So there is a lot of private sector engagement involved, and a lot of these projects are actually led by young people, and they're generating jobs, decent jobs for young people. An example of these mega projects is the Bin Ban solar park. It's one of the biggest solar energy plants in the world, and we as a government of Egypt, we are very proud of this flagship project, not only because it's done in Upper Egypt, in an area that actually it's developing, and it has a lot of opportunities, but also it's done in close partnership with the private sector, either the local companies or also international companies, and it has created so far 10,000 green jobs in this area. So this is just a small example showing the collaboration between the development partners, the private sector, and youth. This is one side. So innovative financing, it's one side, and the engagement with the private sector. The other side to de-risk this transition to the green economy is youth, and it's building the capacity of youth and counting on youth to be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem. So youth have always this capacity to innovate, to think out of the box, to come up with ideas, with innovative solutions for the day-to-day challenges that we are facing. And this being said, supporting entrepreneurship is one of the main roles of the Ministry of International Cooperation in partnership with the development partners. So a lot of development partners, including my colleagues here from the ILO as well, definitely as the Islamic Development Bank, are putting entrepreneurship as one of the priorities. We are seeing this in the country strategies that we are developing with the different international organizations, as also bilateral partners, where they put entrepreneurship and digital transformation in their top priorities. Why is this? Because we believe that technology and the agility that it presents, as well as its scalability, can present solutions for the challenges that are facing the transition towards the green economy. And that's why we at the ministry are supporting a lot the startup ecosystem, and I'm glad to have Hassan with us here, as well as Flat6 Labs, where a lot of development partners are actually spurring investments and putting financial resources in order to flourish this ecosystem, this entrepreneurship ecosystem, from an investment point of view. So this is also something that we are proud of in our work at the ministry. And I believe, again, there is always, the policy mix towards the green transition has to take into consideration not only the aspect of finance, not only the aspect of creating these mega projects, but also the skills needed to operate these projects. And this is why upskilling youth, raising their awareness, raising their capacity in terms of green jobs and green skills, if I may say, is crucial. So we are always trying to strike this balance with all our development partners and our partners from also the private sector.
Thank you very much, Tamer. And moving on to the civil society side of things, I'd like, Ms. Hanan and Nawesa from who's a council member at the Arab Youth Council for Climate Change. This is a very, very new and exciting initiative. Ms. Hanan, if you could please give us an overview of this, initiative that's been around for probably about 1 year, and it's finally giving the youth a platform to voice their concerns about climate change and to also actively participate in varying ways to contribute to this green transition. So my question for you, Ms. Hanan, is what are the main programs that the Council is working on to democratize access to market knowledge, as well as to enhance the youth participation in the green economy? Because I know that access to market knowledge, as we all know, in most ISDB member countries, and particularly in the MENA region, this is one of the main challenges to transition to a green economy: access to market data that does not allow, investors, be they small-scale investors or investors investing in large projects. Access to data is unfortunately a major, or lack of access to data and asymmetric information is a huge barrier to entry for investors, but also for youth, for startups, for SMEs. So I particularly wanted to learn more about the programs that you're implementing and planning on implementing leading up to both COP 26 and 27, and also particularly if you could focus more on what you're doing in terms of access to market knowledge and democratizing market knowledge and youth development as well. The floor is yours, Ms. Hanan.
Thank you so much, Irene, for the introduction. It's an absolute honor to be having this incredible discussion, very important discussion. I will preface this by saying that the Arab Youth Council for Climate Change is doing an incredible job at engaging youth on climate-related issues. So the council operates through the means of 12 council members from 8 Arab nations. And each member is responsible for leading or co-leading a climate-related project that falls under one of the 3 categories, either be it raising awareness, capacity building, or policy recommendations. So one of the projects that I'm currently leading with one of the council members is a climate literacy project. And essentially it is a crash course, both in Arabic and in English, that aims to educate youths in the MENA region on the effects of climate change with respect to the region that they're from. The project aims at by increasing youth's awareness and understanding of environmental issues and challenges, particularly concerning climate change, with respect to their region. We'll hope that this will bridge the gap between education and action. And to Tamer's point, youth are definitely energized, and they definitely have the capacity to innovate and think outside the box to come up with green solutions. This is why we believe that everyone should have access to market knowledge, and education should be free and democratized. And the goal of the project is to inspire more youths to take action-oriented steps towards a greener tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Hanan. And it would be great if you can post on the chat some of the resources that the youth attending with us today could actually tap into, or some of the courses that they could sign up for in the next period. That would be wonderful. It's very, very, very valuable to have access to such resources in the Arabic language. Thank you very much. So moving on to the Islamic Development Bank, now that we've spoken from the public sector perspective, the civil society perspective, Mr. Olatunji Yusuf, Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Islamic Development Bank, who also writes a lot of very important articles and provides resources around climate financing, and building on what Mr. Tamer said as well. This is a huge, huge topic, very, very important one. So we're very lucky to be hosting Mr. Olatunji to dig deeper into some of these topics. So on a broader view, before we dig deeper in the next question, Mr. Olatunji, what is the strategy, the general strategy or direction of the Islamic Development Bank in terms of upskilling the youth and promoting the green economy?
I hope you can hear me.
Very clearly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. First, I think I really need to thank the organizers for actually inviting me, and I feel very honored to be part of this 10th edition of the Youth Development Forum. I recall I was privileged to be part of the organizers of the 4th edition some 6 years ago, and to be here today sitting on the panel, I think it's something that actually means a whole lot to me. So thank you so much, Sharia and colleagues, to have seen how the Youth Development Forum has actually grown over the years to the height where it is now. So kudos and mabruk to you guys. So before delving into what the bank is actually doing, I think there's something that we all agree on. We all agree that we live in critical and unique times, right? And the period that we live in is actually characterized by 3 vital things. One is the fact that today countries are recovering from the aftermath of the pandemic, which has actually created a lot of hardship in many geographies. The other thing again that characterizes the world that we live in today is the fact that there is increase in poverty, increase in many fragile ecosystems. And beyond that is the fact that there is increase in unemployment in many parts of the world, particularly among young people. We've seen inflation actually rise in many jurisdictions across the world in the last couple of months. And the last of these major challenges that we actually face today is the fact that climate change is actually one of the biggest challenges that we've got to face in our generation, including issues around the energy crisis and other socio-political dimensions that are actually related to that. But then having said these 3 main challenges that actually characterize our world, is also the fact that we do know that there are things that would significantly shape the way we live in the most part of the 21st century. One of those is the fact that we know that technology, like as mentioned by colleagues that have spoken before me, is the fact that technological innovation will play a very significant role in the way our cities are developed, in the way infrastructure is actually developed, in the way road networks, in the way businesses, in the way we even relate and associate with each other, from the role that artificial intelligence is going to play. But the other thing again that we also know that would actually shape the most part of the remaining part of the 21st century that we're actually in is the fact that there's going to be an increase in sustainable infrastructure investment that we would see in astronomical rate that we've never seen before, that a lot of emphasis that has been placed on increase in actually investing in sustainable infrastructure will characterize most part of the 78 years that is left in this century. And then the last thing that we're going to see that will feature very well in the remaining part of this century is the fact that there's going to be a drive for increased resource productivity. And one of the speakers that have actually spoken before me also alluded to that. So when you look at these challenges and you look at these drivers, they are the key things that have actually shaped the strategy of the bank, particularly with the new strategy of the bank that is going to be finalized in the annual meeting of the bank that actually commences next day. But then I haven't talked about all these issues. Yes, the bank today, we're looking into how we can support our clients to actually boost recovery. We're looking at how we can help them address poverty. But then importantly, we're talking about helping them drive green economic growth, which is actually the long-term goal. But because of the conversation that we're having here today, I'll be focusing my intervention on how the bank is actually helping to actually drive green economic growth. For the first time in the history of the bank, this is the first time we're having a standalone pillar when it comes to the strategic direction of the bank that is specifically focused on driving green economic growth, which is a very huge achievement for us, particularly those of us that are within that space. But then to talk specifically as to how the strategy that the bank is actually using to actually help advance driving green economic growth and helping young people to be part of this process. There are three main entry points. The first, which many of you might probably be aware of, is the fact that the bank actually does something that is called ensuring that these very important aspects, such as youth engagement, such as youth empowerment, such as youth education, alongside climate change related issues, they're actually mainstream and integrated as part of our strategy or of the lending. Every financing that's actually provided by the bank would have to actually ensure that these elements are clearly incorporated in them. But beyond just integrating is also the place of harmonization, because it's very possible that we actually invest in a low carbon transport investment, but then there is less inclusive youth inclusion in that process. So there is no harmonization. So we try to ensure that there is that harmonization between these objectives, whether it's climate objective, whether it's youth agenda. That harmonization part actually plays a very crucial role. And we see this applied across, whether it's energy investment, whether it's transport investment, whether it's agriculture investment, whether it's food security. So that's one of the key roles that the bank actually plays, the role of ensuring that there's that mainstreaming and harmonization that actually happens. And this also happens within the context of the Paris alignment discussion that the bank is actually is considering to actually implement. That's one. The other thing is about product development. Product development is actually a key element of what the bank does. For those that are quite familiar with what the bank, you know that different product has been developed over the years. I will just give two examples. One is actually a product that we developed alongside the government of Lebanon called the Lebanon Green Investment Facility. So what this facility actually does is to help the government of Lebanon to mobilize climate finance resources to be able to actually drive their green growth agenda. And of course, one of the key elements of that facility is to ensure that youth involvement becomes part and parcel of it, that there is element of what is to be supported through the financing that is actually mobilized through that facility that are actually supporting youth activity. Another example is the case of a crowdfunding facility that we actually supported in Uganda through the Trine project to develop solar home system. The reason why this project is a bit interesting is that the bank played a very crucial role to give confidence to other investors to be able to come and put their resources into it. So the presence of the bank in such type of facilities actually plays a very key role in sending a signal to potential investors to actually give them that level of confidence. And these are some of the roles that we play. And of course, there are quite a number of other products that we've actually developed alongside with our friends, from the Green Climate Fund, specifically aimed at the private sector, with a lot of youth elements that are actually involved in them. Because of that, I'm just going to go to the last point, that we also play a very critical role in supporting youth and also ensuring that these activities also get towards driving green economic growth, is how we actually advance and forge collaboration with different stakeholders, like we're having in this conversation today. Colleagues that have spoken before me have actually alluded to the fact that we've had that very strong collaboration between our respective institutions, and that's one of the key things that the bank actually does, forging strong collaboration for these causes that we actually believe in, whether with multilateral development banks, bilateral, private sector stakeholders. A typical example of that is the issues around just transition. This is one of the key areas we know that youth involvement is actually very, very critical to a just transition, because we know that no one institution can actually solve that. And that's why, as MDBs, we continue to play that critical role to see that what are those principles that will guide our operations to ensure that there is the transition that we're talking about. It's not just transition that actually would deprive certain groups of people to the advantage of some persons, to ensure that it is very inclusive, to ensure that it is driven by the countries, it is driven by young people, it is driven by people with disability, it is driven by women, it is driven by all groups that are very critical to the development process. So collaboration continues to play that role because of the ability of the bank to be able to actually convey or mobilize or that convening power and strength that development banks have really got. We use that to actually leverage and advance causes that are actually to the advantage of young people and also doing that core benefit of driving what's it called, driving the development for young people, but also driving climate and low carbon and resilient objects. So I'm going to stop there and pass it over to you, Irene. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Olatunji. This was really, really useful, and I'm really glad that you touched on the different key pillars that we really should be investing in, whether it's youth engagement and education, product development, specialized financing instruments, innovative financing instruments. I'm very excited to learn more about the crowdfunding experience, because I think this could also unlock many clean tech markets in the MENA region as well, and for also touching upon the importance of making sure that nobody is left behind, and how this is properly streamlined across that, all these sector activities, and even across, whether it's the small scale projects that the bank is working on, or whether it's the large infrastructure projects. So this was really interesting to learn more about, and thank you for catering to the diverse and necessary pillars in this green transition. So moving on to the private sector side of things, we have Mr. Hassan Mansi, who is an entrepreneur and also co-founder and program director at Flat 6 Labs. Until we prepare the presentation, I actually would like to say that we're very happy to have Flat 6 Labs with us, because they're one of the first and probably the most regional, and have the most presence in the MENA region and in other countries as well, as technology accelerators, but also seed investors. And we're probably one of the first movers and took some of the biggest risks in this sector, at least in the MENA region. So I'll allow for Mr. Hassan to present an overview of Flat 6 Labs' work prior to digging into some of the questions.
Thank you so much, Irene. I'm very excited to be in this panel, and I believe that's not the future, that's actually the present and the very near future. So without further ado, I'll just start my presentation. So I just want to say that the climate tech sector is a very important sector in not only in the MENA region, but in the whole world. Globally, the investment in the climate tech sector continuing to show strong growth as an emerging asset class, with a total of almost $87 billion invested in the second half of 2020 and the first half of 2021. While in the first half of 2021, we were delivering record investment levels in excess of almost $60 billion. This represents almost 210% increase from the previous $28 billion in the 12-month prior. We can easily say, roundly speaking, that the climate tech accounts almost for 14 cents of every venture capital dollar. Next, please. However, if we're talking about the challenges and risks that entrepreneurs and startups working in the clean tech industry are facing, they are quite innovative. That's the term to use. So the clean tech ventures have much more technology risks than the typical VC investments. And the reason behind that is that the clean tech companies are commercializing fundamentally new materials and processes that in many instances have only recently emerged from scientific labs. That's why they will be facing numerous challenges. I've just named only a few here, while working with prototype for market validation or selling a product, a functional and proven product, or even scaling deployment that allows the company to achieve financial stability. I think that's very, very, very lucky. Next, please. Next. Yes. I'm sorry. That's my bad. Technology. So I just want to say that as an advice to clean tech companies or entrepreneurs who are starting this journey, I want to tell you that impact investment and entrepreneurs and VCs who are focusing with great intention on expect investment are coming to the region. It's nascent, but it's growing in the region. Having an ecosystem that is ready, having startups already working in that field would definitely pave the way, and it would definitely make it easier for that ecosystem to grow. I'm proud to say that this is not something that is new. We've already been investing in companies that are working in this arena. I will just name a few of them. Next slide, please. As you can see, Bekia, Rona, Mycelium, Tajaddud, all of them. I just want to highlight a couple of them. Rona, who is transforming agricultural waste into wood that is being used in maybe furniture manufacturing or other purposes, or Mycelium, who is using a mushroom technology in order to produce replacement products for styrofoam, or even Bekia, which is an online platform for home users in order to be able to trade and sell and exchange plastics recycling. I would stop here to give some time for my colleagues, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan. And if the audience has any questions on the slides that were presented, please feel free to write them on the chat box. So, Mr. Hassan, you've answered my questions, but I think what I would like to learn from your experience. Of course, you've been doing this for a very long time, working with various different types of startups. So I'm interested to know, Hassan, how you see clean technology markets. I know you pointed to some of the challenges and risks in your slides, but how do you see clean tech markets in general and the potential of these clean tech markets? And if you can also touch upon how you would compare investing in them versus, investing in clean tech is still tech, but investing in other types of tech, for example.
I would highlight Egypt in my answer, if I may, because Egypt Egypt as an example can easily portray the contrast between now and before. So now clean tech industries and clean tech startups are under focus. And the reason behind that there is a national strategic objective that we become a hub for clean tech and clean energy in the region. And as my colleague Tamer mentioned, the Bimban solar plant that is located in southern Egypt, and maybe in Zafarana we have the windmill plants, and they are the biggest in the region. So entrepreneurs, fortunately, are coming with new ways now to actually hone in that presence and capitalize on this opportunity. So we've been incubating startups like developing robots that waterless robots that to clean, for instance, the solar panels in the desert, because the efficiency of the energy created from these solar panels are directly proportional to the amount of dust and clarity of the panel itself. So that kind of solution and innovation is actually popping up and now is on the surface, and it's available for investors. So my answer for you that the scene is changing, it's improving, it's rapidly growing, and as you've seen in my first slide, investments is almost doubled from year over year, so 210% between 12-month period comparison. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan, and I think we're ready to take some questions in the Q&A chat. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and if we're not getting in as many questions, I may point to some of the speakers with a couple of burning questions on my end at least. But I'd like to invite the audience, both on YouTube and on Zoom, to share your questions, and the technical team will be supporting and consolidating them. So I'll give the audience about 15 seconds to prepare your questions. So there's one question on the chat that I think Ms. Hanan is best placed to answer, and for the other panelists, please feel free to jump in to add your responses and your feedback as well. So we have a question from Pietro. How can young people be engaged in environmental policy making? And do you have practical and good practices to share?
Thank you, Pietro, for your question. I believe that in order to have your message be heard, you need to study the market. You need to see where there's a gap in the country that you're living in. What is it that you're trying to solve? Actually understanding that and benchmarking it with other countries to develop a strong policy. And then when you want to pitch your policy recommendation, my biggest tip is to not come from the perspective of youth, even though you are youth and you want to be taken seriously. But in order to have a seat at the table, speak as if you were speaking like the language of the decision makers. This will ensure that they take your policy recommendation maybe a little bit more seriously and take it into consideration for action. That's just my personal opinion.
This is great, and I completely agree with you. Do any of the other panelists have any reflections on this question as well? Mr. Tamer, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I believe a part of engaging with youth is to engage them in the dialogue. And given that environmental issues are cross-border, and it needs more of an international aspect to to discuss them and to engage with youth on them. Egypt is organizing yearly a forum for young, like basically it's similar to this forum that we are in today, but it's more, it has a physical format, and it's covering different topics. It's called the World Youth Forum, in which there are different topics that are discussed. And the last forum was organized this year in January, where young people from all over the world come and discuss, and showcase their ideas and their solutions to the different topics. And I believe having this dialogue, not only on a national level, but on an international level amongst youth is very important. And also we are looking forward to welcoming you all at COP27, which will be hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt this November, where I think youth and technology will be having a very important aspect in the way to transform the commitments that have been done in the previous COPs, including COP26, into actions. So we count on youth to be part of the dialogue. So these are just two examples on top of my head to answer the question.
That's excellent, Mr. Tamer. Given also that you've provided with two very, very tangible ways that youth could participate, and if anybody else on the panelists have any ideas about platforms or events or policy making roundtables that the youth could be part of, please share that on the chat as well. So we have a question for Mr. Olatunji, and that is, can you give us more details about the green facility in Lebanon?
Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So the Green Facility in Lebanon is a joint initiative of the Islamic Development Bank the World Bank, and the UNDP under the NDC partnership. So the whole idea is that we create a facility to actually help, because we know that countries have got a lot of strategies that they want to actually actualize. That comes with a lot of financial requirements. So a facility is like a national fund that helps to actually mobilize private and public resources to be able to actually actualize that goal. So what we're able to do is to actually help the government of Lebanon to actually set the needed framework to actually establish that facility, of course, which went through a lot of internal government processes, as well as some very robust structure that is actually needed. To actually, of course, because we do not manage that facility has to be managed by the government. But we just played that role in working with the government to be able to actually establish that. Of course, we would be very happy to actually also learn about the progress that the government of Lebanon has actually made since the time we actually completed that, hopefully in the next couple of years. But it's actually a very good initiative, and we're beginning to see a lot of countries also follow this path, particularly in this age where driving green economic growth is now becoming a very strategic focus of many countries. So then the question around where the resources for that would typically come from. One of the ways to address them is actually to have that pot that countries do have, whether at the national level or subnational level, where resources can easily be channeled, because it makes it much easier to actually mobilize resources through those facilities. I hope that actually answered the question.
That's very clear, Mr. Olatunji, and we have a question from YouTube actually, and that is from Anakiara Scandoni, Ms. Anakiara Scandoni from UNIDO, and that is, how can we ensure reaching out to and engaging rural areas, given that rural areas have great potential for fostering the transition to a greener economy, and of course also for increasing inclusiveness on various aspects. So Ms. Anakiara, if you could also speak a little bit to the programs that the UNIDO has been working on for the last at least 6 to 7 years regarding promoting the green economy, promoting green entrepreneurship, and also fostering a green transition in rural areas particularly. So to the technical team, if possible, this is a question from YouTube. So how do you recommend that we enable this two-way dialogue?
I don't think they have access. YouTube do not have access to the mics. But yeah, if you're familiar perhaps with their work, you might want to share that, Irene.
Sure, and then the panelists, I think Mr. Tamer also has an answer to that question. But basically, just as in a nutshell, the UNIDO has a program, actually works on probably more than 8 to 9 programs on different aspects, both on the industrial greening side, but also on startups and MSMEs. And I invite you to go on their open platform. I will share a link to that to get an overview of all the projects that they're working on in terms of the green transition. But basically, one of the most important projects that's tackling rural development is the Industrial Green Growth Project, which the UNIDO has launched about a year and a half ago. And this project will continue to be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years. And they very much focus on value chain development in key competitive areas in 2 of the poorest and most rural areas, Egypt, Luxor and Kenya, which have been hit very hard by COVID and hard hit in tourism as well. So this project really works on value chain development in certain specific value chains where these 2 governorates could be competitive, and they're really promoting SME startup development within these value chain gaps, in addition to promoting green financing facilities, also engaging with policymakers and working on key policy interventions as well in key areas where support and resources could help both develop the value chains, but also develop the economy at large in these two governorates. So on the policy side, on the access to finance side, but also on the startup and MSME side. And there's also a piece related to labor market development. So I will share a link on the chat for anybody in the audience who's interested to really delve into the various programs that UNIDO was offering. And I'll give the floor as well to Mr. Tamer Taha and Ms. Olga to reflect on this point as well. On engaging rural economies in the green transition, particularly.
Thank you, Irene. And very briefly answering the question from Ana Chiara. Egypt has a flagship project called the Haya Karima, or a decent life in Arabic, and it's focusing actually on improving the livelihood of people in rural areas. And as you mentioned in your question, the rural areas have great opportunities, especially if we are counting on the transition towards a more green economy. Definitely, the rural areas has a great role to play, and especially what's very interesting in this project, it's done across more than 4,500 villages in Egypt in different phases. The very interesting part of this project that it's counting on young volunteers in partnership with the biggest local NGOs in Egypt. So it has a lot, like a very huge number of volunteers where they go in each village and they do an assessment of their needs, whether it's in terms of infrastructure, it's in terms of education, in terms of public services and so on. And they work on a village by village basis, and all this done by the civil society and with the support of the civil society, and definitely hands in hands with the local authorities and the government. So I would encourage you to have a look on this project. It has it's a mega project of Egypt, and it's focusing on the rural areas in the road towards the transition to the green economy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olga.
Yes, thank you very much. Look, when we speak about rural areas, it's really, we need to think about agriculture, which is a sector which is one of the largest contributors towards climate change, in fact, because it is one of heavily polluting sectors. So a lot can be done in improving sustainability of agricultural practices themselves and moving more to the organic agriculture produce. But also there is the whole area of meteorology, climatology, so the whole science that actually helps also agriculture to be more productive and at the same time more sustainable. So this is one area of work, but then of course, if we speak about rural areas, there is a huge potential for developing renewable energy, solar farming, wind farming, and that is something very much under demand. Well, UNIDO, I know that they have this LKDF facility, which is basically a public-private partnership that puts together businesses with vocation education training. And we actually implemented a similar project in renewable energy supported by Swedish SIDA in Zambia and in Zimbabwe as well, renewable energy. And in Zambia, particularly, there is a training center that is now expanding its facility to other countries of the region and training, capacitating youth and also old adult workers in developing renewable energy practices and in different occupations of renewable energy. So that is one of examples. And another thing which I wanted to mention, since there was a question also how to engage youth and how to make sure that the greening policies also address youth. I think it's really important to think in terms of a comprehensiveness of policies. So, for example, one in the ILO we speak about just transition. For us, it's not only the policy which is very inclusive, which is of course by definition we have to address different groups, but it's also comprehensive in the sense that it unites entrepreneurial policy, employment policy, which is also addressing specific youth challenges and puts together measures addressing youth. It's education and training policy, it's active labor market policies, including the institutions of that support labor market and career guidance and so on. And of course, it's social partnership. So this complexity actually allows also to engage youth and make sure that what is put on the agenda, on the policy agenda, is relevant for youth, and the jobs which are created are interesting and attractive for youth. They have a good quality, not only green, because I think green as a chapeau is already by definition is quite attractive for young people. They would like to see themselves working not just as plumbers or electricians, but rather as green plumbers and green electricians and green engineers and so on. But it's also to make sure that the quality of these jobs are good enough for educated youth who have invested the resources and time in receiving their qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I would like to encourage anybody who would like to share resources. If you're not able to share it on the group, you can share it to the host and panelists, and we'll be sure to share it with the rest of the audience if there are any resources that could benefit the audience with us today. So there's a question by Mr. Andrew Daniel, who I think also answers, I think in your response, you also cater to Mr. Mohammed Buhairi's question from Sri Lanka. So Andrew asks, how can we open channels to the youth in local communities in Africa to get access to finance from DFIs in their local currencies in terms of hedging or fluctuated currencies? And I know that Mr. Mohammed was asking earlier practical examples about, okay, as youth, this is a crisis, we realize it very well, but how can us on an individual level do something about it? So Mr. Andrew, if you could also tell us a little bit more about your background, the company that you represent in Egypt, and then also ask your question, but you can also elaborate a little bit more on how you yourself engage local communities in terms of, and local startups and companies in terms of access to finance across Africa as well.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Andrew Daniel. I'm the founder of ERSEC. ERSEC is Integrated Renewable and Sustainable Communities. We are a Pan-African company who are active in Egypt and Zambia as well. And we are opening now our new branches in South Africa and Lesotho. And this one of the most challenging points that DFIs are dealing with, like big entities in hard currencies. And when it comes to local currencies and the hedging between local currencies, not all the local banks have access to this finance. So definitely we are trying to find solutions to enable the startups in these countries to have access to this finance. And we'd love to hear from you more about this challenge.
Thank you very much. So if possible, I think I'll leave the floor to Olatunji to answer this question, being very, very well placed. And Olatunji, if you could also, I know you mentioned crowdfunding earlier, but if you can elaborate more on some of the innovative financing instruments that you have seen and how the bank has been supporting access to finance. And I think we'll close with a quick summary of what has been said before moving on to the big surprise that the bank has ready for all of us.
Thank you so much. I think the issue of finance remains a very big challenge, particularly in many parts of the developing world. particularly when you look at some sectors where maybe the prospect that investors do actually see in those sectors is actually not quite high. So probably a lot of investors might probably be discouraged to want to venture into those. I'm going to speak first from the public side of things. Aside from the example that I gave around crowdfunding, which is resources that were actually mobilized, not just within the country, it's included within the country and externally. So, but then one fundamental thing is that often when people talk about resources like this, that is a challenge, is often that the reliance on public resources is usually the challenge. To drive the transition that we actually want in many of these countries, public resources alone is not what we need. In fact, public resources is just a very limited amount of resources that is available for the type of transition that we actually need. So the question is, how do we actually ensure that the private sector play that very critical role in this whole mix of things? So the more private sector that we have, the more foreign direct investment that we have in those countries, the more enabling that environment is, then the more you actually have forex, foreign exchange resources, to be able to actually address many of these challenges. So the real challenge is actually, they're much more systemic than just single projects that we work on. Say we're working on a clean tech project, or we're working on. It goes beyond just those single projects to much more economic-wide, because look at it from this perspective. We're talking about transition. Transition is, we're looking at it from a whole of a system approach, whole of a society approach, which would include energy, which would include transport. Imagine all these sectors being productive in these different areas of green transition. It will mean that then you have a lot of resources locally. It will mean that you have a lot of resources from foreign direct investment. Then that economy becomes much more stimulated with those foreign, and you don't have those issues with foreign exchange. This issue is very peculiar to, for instance, in my country, where forex remains a major challenge, mainly because there is a much more systemic issue, which is the country actually relies heavily on crude oil sales to be able to actually get forex. So it becomes challenging for small businesses to be able to actually get those type of foreign exchange vis-a-vis what is available in the local market, and then to be able to actually engage in some of those external businesses and things like that. So the simple answer here is that it's a much complicated problem. These sort of issues are much more complicated because they go beyond just individual what's it called, sector, or they go beyond individual institutions, and they go to as far as the monetary and physical outlook of those countries themselves, to be able to actually ensure that those things are actually addressed. To be honest, I may not have the right answer to the solution to this, but I do feel strongly that the one quick way to do this is to actually have much more sectors that are actually driving this process, where you actually have a critical mass of those forex resources to be able to drive the needed growth. If we just have single sectors that are driving this, then those sectors will probably have to still struggle. In some cases, government would come in to actually provide support, but those support may not be the most sufficient. They may not be the most sufficient and the most sustainable in the long run. Hence, having that whole of a system approach where different sectors, from agriculture, from agribusiness, from tech to energy, and that's the whole idea of having that strategy, robust strategy at the national level that looks into green growth from that holistic whole of society, whole of a country approach, where those critical sectors those sectors that are very critical to the growth, to drive green economic growth in those countries, they actually generate the needed resources to be able to actually actualize those goals. Else, countries will continue to actually have those issues, particularly when it comes to issues around foreign exchange, when it comes to the issues of having to actually edge some of the resources that they have in those local markets, as we actually have it in many countries. So critical issue, but it goes beyond just one sector to a much more what's it called, national economic wide issue. So I don't know if there's any other person that would like to also add to the point that I've actually made. Right.
Thank you very much, Olatunji. We can go on about this topic for probably another, full day. But this opened up a lot of ideas and a lot of sub-discussions that could take place with the bank in the future and follow-up activities. So actually, we have about probably a minute and a half left. So I would like to invite the panelists, and perhaps we can start with Olatunji since your mic is still unmuted. If we could hear your final words, your call to action to the audience who are with us today. We have youth, we have entrepreneurs, we have startups, we have governments, we have civil society entities. So if you can, close us off with the most important key message and the call to action that you would like to leave the youth with, and as Mr. Muhammad on the chat just mentioned, we realize the criticality of this transition, and we're also seeing that there's a lot of momentum, which makes us very happy. However, what are some of the key actions that we could really be working on in the near future, whether being a business or an entrepreneur or a member of society? If you can leave us off with your most important message and your most important call to action, I'd like the panelists to each present that in about 30 seconds.
So I think if there's anything I would like the audience to take away today is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to driving green economic growth. It has to be a lot of options would have to be on the table, particularly when it comes to the issues around finance. For many years, public sector have actually dominated when it comes to financing, but there is a lot that is actually still out there in the private sector, particularly for market-based resources. That the focus should not just be, we've seen a lot of staggering numbers. We've talked about the $26 trillion that the green economy can give us between now and 2030. We know that from the ILO reports that 18 million net jobs can be created by 2030. Those are staggering numbers, right? But those staggering numbers will not happen if the public sector is the sole focus. Rather, a combination of public sector, but then to actually serve as an enabler for more private sector involvement, because that's exactly where the solution is. The private sector, the technology, the innovation, the AI, the new tech, they're going to come from the private sector. They're not going to come from the public sector. So the public sector is just there as enablers, but then the private sector is exactly where the solution, the real solution actually is. And then until and unless we actually have all part of the puzzle being put into the picture, then we'll be able to actually actualize the goal of reaching that net zero and of having a world that is safe, that is just, that is fair, and that is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring message, Mr. Olatunji. Ms. Olga, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you for mentioning our numbers. I remember when I was putting this into the report, we had two scenarios, and then eventually I merged this into one, because I think the scenarios of the transition to renewable energy and the scenario of the transition to circular economy are not really mutually exclusive. Therefore, overall, indeed, there is a potential of creating over 100 million jobs globally. This is impressive, but there is also danger of losing close to 80 million. However, my argument always is we don't have to lose those jobs. If we manage to upskill people efficiently, we can actually create jobs and reskill people into new occupations, reskill people into the occupations, in these groups of occupations, to transfer from industries that will be losing jobs to those industries that will be gaining from the green transition. And therefore, with efficient skilling policies, we can really achieve much more. But I think also from the point of view of the current multiple crisis and the already the energy crisis which we are already going through, I think this is something we have to recognize, and the food security, food crisis, which is really expected to come in really close months. We have all also to think about how we can diversify our economies into green, into digital economies by creating good and decent jobs, and what will be the exact incentives in the public policy. Why? Because these 100 million jobs, they are not happening by default. Of course, the role of the private sector is key, but it's also a big space for the public policy. And that public policies, they have to be smart. They have to provide incentives for the private investments. to attract investors, to diversify from the economies away from fossil fuel-based energy generation, away from heavily relying manufacturing on fossil fuels, and so on. And only with these smart incentives, we can really achieve more jobs, better jobs, and also jobs for everybody, including youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olga. This was very, very inspiring. So I'll move on to Ms. Hanan.
Thank you, Irene. I'm just going to ask an open-ended question. Do you know the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? The one where Goldilocks first tries her porridge and it ends up being too hot. And then the second time she tries it, it was too cold. And then finally, she tries the last porridge and it ends up being not too hot and not too cold, just the right perfect temperature, and she ate it. Well, for the next 2 years, we will be living in that Goldilocks moment. This moment is COP27 and COP28. I believe that youth need to capitalize on the fact that COP27 and COP28 are going to take place in 2 of ISDB member countries, Egypt and UAE. There could not be a better opportunity than this for young people to make an impact in their countries. I want young people watching this forum to be inspired, to push themselves further, and have a growth mindset. Develop your green competencies, develop your skills, develop your climate project ideas, ensure you have a strong partnership model, pitch these ideas, connect with the right people, and make it happen. You really do have a great opportunity to make an impact. Use it to your advantage. This 2-year window is the time to make an impact. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more, Hanan, and I'll pass on the mic to Mr. Hassan.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you so much, my fellow panelists. I would like to say that investment and startups are shaping currently the new economy of the world, and we have seen how disruption and how startups have been actively changing the way we live, and this should not be new or different to the clean tech industry in general, or the circular economy, or the green energy, or what we have on the table. So I believe that we will always be surprised with the amount of innovation that is coming specifically outside from the center areas like capitals, or the area that has the most center of attention or the most resources, and how entrepreneurs in rural areas and in Africa specifically are solving their community problems using technology and innovation. I believe green tech is not an option anymore. Now that we're specifically in Egypt, we're facing maybe the 4 seasons in 1 season. So climate has already changed, and we need to stop that. We need to actually have control over our maybe destiny or the future. We need to leave the world as a better place for our next generations. So I rely on all the parties, and specifically on entrepreneurs and the youth, in order to take that. And we, as an entrepreneurial support organization and the leading seed stage VC in the region, we support that. We have supported that, and we have all of our.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan. And last but not least, Mr. Tamer Taha, your closing note and call to action for the youth.
Thank you very much, Irene, and all the co-panelists. It has been a very interesting discussion. In terms of closing remarks and the call to action, I believe the transition towards green economy, it's a fact now. We understand the need. I believe this cannot be done by one entity alone or one country alone. It has to be done from a multi-stakeholder approach. that is with the 3 INs. So international, it has to be an international dialogue on the different challenges that the planet is facing today. It has to be inclusive, including the voice of youth, the voice of the young generation that will be taking the major part in the near future. And it has to be innovative, because if we are going to solve the same with the same tools and the same ideas that has caused these challenges, it would be very challenging. So inclusive, international, and innovative, I believe this is the way forward for a multi-stakeholder approach dialogue. And we all look forward to the engagement of young and youth and young entrepreneurs in providing such solutions. And I believe maybe we have to always keep optimism that the future will be, with all what's happening, in spite of all what's happening. But I believe the energy of youth and the ideas that never failed to surprise us, coming from youth, are what we need to focus on in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring closing note, and I would like to thank all the panelists for your very rich and heartfelt, but also your advice and your recommendations and reflections that come from a very, very deep place. And we really appreciate this. And again, thank you to the Islamic Development Bank for this opportunity to have this very needed discussion, also from the perspective of a very diverse and very well-embedded and well-rooted group of panelists. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for your time and knowledge and for your passion as well. For those of you who did not get your questions answered, the team at the Islamic Development Bank will do their best to relay your questions to the host and panelists. But I would encourage you to, again, if there's any resources, any pages, any platforms, any readings that the audience would like to share with their fellow participants, please feel free to share them with the host and panelists, and then we can share it to the larger audience as well. Knowledge is power, so let's keep doing this throughout the session today. So I'll pass on the baton to Ms. Sharia Walker.
Thank you so much, Irene, for such an interesting conversation, and thank you to the panelists, for a real mind-provoking discussion. Just like you said, Irene, I mean, this conversation really can go on and on. There's just so many, dynamics to it. Just a few key points that, jumped out to me during this discussion about, building youth resilience and the green economy. The future is actually the present, which Hassan mentioned. I mean, that's definitely what we're seeing. There is a reiteration over and over again about, when we're talking about green economy, just inclusivity and human-centered has to be, at the forefront. Diversifying, the economy, the important role of private sector, as drivers of this solution, and also, this multi-stakeholder approach in innovation. These are all like really key words that that stood out. But I think now is the moment that we've all been waiting for. And Hanan, her call was, to encouraging youth to develop their green project ideas. And with that, it gives me great pleasure, and it's my honor to invite our Acting Director General of Global Practice and Partnerships, Amir Bukvij, to formally make our announcement that we want to share with you, as well as giving the closing remarks. Over to you, Amir Bukvij.
Thank you, Sharia. It was really my great pleasure to attend and listen carefully to the discussions you had. Now, for the closing, I would just like to address the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, with the greeting of Salamu Alaikum, and My name is, as Sharia mentioned, Amer Bukvich. I am Acting Director General of Global Practices and Partnerships at the Islamic Development Bank. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers and panelists for their really valuable contribution to our event. Additionally, my deepest gratitude goes to the virtual participants. Your engagement and participation helped make this a successful event. Today, we celebrate our 10th Youth Development Forum, in which we address the pressing topic of building youth resilience, transition to green economy, and beyond. The panel discussion provided a holistic overview of the topic from a variety of perspectives, including public sector, private sector, youth empowerment, as well as development organization and MDBs. From the discussion, we understand that in order to ensure young women and men are not left behind as we move towards a green economy, stakeholders must collaborate in sustainable partnerships. Some of the key outcomes from the discussion include increased awareness on the concept of green jobs, its relevance to youth, and implications for the future jobs. Enhance understanding of national regulatory frameworks and employment policies that promote green jobs for youth, and the importance of upskilling and reskilling youth to prepare them for green jobs and climate action. Finally, it is my privilege and great pleasure on behalf of Islamic Development Bank and in celebration of the Youth Development Forum's 10th anniversary to formally launch the ISDB, an international labor organization, very first Youth Green Challenge entitled Youth Green Skills Accelerator, promoting youth participation and skills for a just transition. The objective of the call is to identify, develop, test, and disseminate innovative ideas and solutions by young people in ISDB, ILO common member countries with competencies required for their meaningful green engagement. When I say young people, I refer to ages between 15 and 35. Now I turn the floor over back to Sister Sharia Walker, who will share more details about the challenge call. Finally, I would like to convey a special thanks to the Youth Development Organizing Team for their priceless contributions in organizing and running a smooth event. We are very proud of you. Thank you. Back to you, Sister Sharia.
Thank you so much, DJ Amer, for your announcement. And just a little more on the call. This challenge call is an invitation from the ISDB and the ILO to youth-led organizations, networks, or coalitions based in ISDB or ILO common member countries to propose new and innovative ideas and solutions by youth with the competencies required for supporting a just transition in their communities. Next slide, please. So the deadline for this challenge call is in August 12th. My colleagues will put in the chat box below the link that will take you to the challenge call. There will be 3 selected winners for the challenge who will receive the following support. Financial support. The financial support awarded to the first place winners will be $50,000. The second place winner will receive $30,000, and the third place winner will receive $20,000 to support them in implementing their proposed solution. They will also receive technical support through an online innovation lab to support developing and piloting their ideas. And finally, they will also receive global visibility. The winning proposals will receive support to raise awareness around their ideas and solutions, including an invitation to attend COP27. The link for the challenge call and the details, including the application forms, requirements, guidelines, and deadlines, is being shared here in the chat box, but also will be found, or you can also find it on the ISDB homepage, as well as the ILO's homepage. So if my colleagues can, so this is the link. If you click on the link, this is the page, the landing page it will take you to. So please go through the link and you can find all of the necessary information on the challenge for your participation here. And finally, we will wish all applicants, the best of luck. May the best application and the strongest, innovation win. And this brings us to the end of today's Youth Development Forum. So thank you for joining us, and my sincerest gratitude to our speakers, panelists, and our moderator, and a very special word of appreciation to the youth organizing team who worked relentlessly to bring together the youth training, this Youth Development Forum, and the launching of the Youth Green Challenge. A special thank you to Rahaf Junaid, Muna Munshi, Teba Beige, Abdul Qadir Baba Ahmed, Yusra Shangiti, and Maha Abul Khair. Until our next event, I bid you farewell. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.